Have you ever been in a situation where maybe you're sitting across a desk from a job candidate, right? Or you're listening to a pitch from a vendor.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And on paper,
Yeah.
everything is just absolutely flawless. Like the resume is immaculate.
Right. They went to all the right schools.
Exactly. They have, 10 years of the exact right experience, glowing references, all the data just lines up perfectly.
That's a total slam dunk.
It's a slam dunk. Your logical brain is looking at this saying, okay, this is it. But then somewhere deep down in your stomach, your gut is just screaming at you, do not hire this person.
It's the worst feeling, isn't it?
It really is. And the wildest part is when your colleague asks you why you're hesitating, you literally cannot find the words. You just, stammer something like, I don't know, man, the vibe is just off.
Yeah, the vibe is off. It is honestly one of the most universally frustrating human experiences because we really like to believe we are these highly evolved, rational creatures, right?
Oh, for sure. We love our spreadsheets.
We do. We think we make decisions based on empirical evidence. But when the chips are down, we are entirely at the mercy of this invisible, undeniable intuition.
We just let our gut override the data.
Exactly. And we can't even articulate why.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. I am so glad you're here with us today because our mission for this one is massive. Today, we are going to look at the exact literal biological reason why that gut feeling phenomenon happens.
Which is fascinating because it completely upends how most of us think about communication, and leadership and motivation.
It really does. So we're unpacking a stack of research, some incredible case studies, and critical analyses, all centered around one of the most influential leadership frameworks out there right now. Simon Sinek's concept from his book, Start With Why.
Yeah, we're basically deconstructing the secret sauce behind the most successful leaders and organizations in the world.
Right, like we're looking at the phenomena behind companies like Apple back under Steve Jobs or Harley-Davidson, and we're trying to answer this one fundamental question.
Why do some organizations create these massive, irrational, cult-like followings, while others who might even have better products or cheaper prices endlessly struggle just to make a single sale?
Exactly. But we are going to approach this with a very specific lens for you today. We aren't here to just, list out the habits of highly effective people.
Right, no superficial marketing playbooks here.
No way. We're going to look at the underlying mechanics, the psychology, the history, and the literal neuroscience of why we do what we do.
And we are going to really challenge our fundamental assumptions about motivation. We'll explore how a singular focus on purpose can either build an absolute empire or, if you misapply it, completely blind you to reality.
But before we can even begin to understand how to inspire people, we have to look in the mirror, right? We have to understand how flawed our default decision-making process actually is.
How it is deeply flawed.
Because fundamentally, we fall into this incredibly dangerous trap. Basically, we assume we know the truth, and then we build these massive, complex systems on top of those false assumptions.
It's the illusion of foundational knowledge. I mean, the human brain is incredibly energy intensive, so it loves a good shortcut.
It loves to just file things away.
Right. It takes a perceived truth, files it away as a fact, and then just never questions it again. And then we make these massive, sweeping decisions based on those completely unverified assumptions.
Okay, let's unpack this with the classic historical example. The belief in a flat Earth.
Oh, perfect example.
Right. For centuries, the smartest minds on the planet operated on the completely false assumption that if you sailed too far in one direction, you just, fall off the edge of the world.
Like a waterfall into space.
Yeah. And what's fascinating isn't just that they were wrong, it's how that false assumption actively dictated human behavior.
It completely hindered global exploration.
Exactly. It stalled trade, it stalled the sharing of ideas. People behaved entirely logically by staying close to the shore, but their logic was built on a deeply flawed premise.
Right. And, while it's easy for us to look back at the flat Earth theory and just laugh at how naive it was, the sources point out some much more insidious modern examples of how false assumptions blind us.
Oh, like the political power example.
Yes. Consider the way we think about the seizure of political power. If you ask the average person how a dictator takes over a country, the assumption is almost always that it happens through overwhelming violent force, right?
Yeah. You picture armed military coups, tanks rolling down the streets.
A sudden and brutal overthrow of the government. But the historical record provides one of the most devastating anomalies to this. January 30th, 1933.
Right, the day Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany.
Exactly. And to be clear, we're just looking impartially at the historical data here. He didn't seize the office in a violent coup that day.
He was appointed.
He was sworn in. He navigated the existing legal political framework of the Weimar Republic to ascend to that chief executive role.
Which completely shatters the assumption.
It really does. And the danger of that false assumption is profound. Because when a society assumes that tyranny only arrives via armed rebellion from the outside, they become completely blind to the vulnerabilities within their own standard political processes.
They don't watch the slow erosion of norms from the inside because they're too busy looking out the window for tanks.
Exactly. Decisions made on false assumptions, whether it's about geography or political history, they leave us entirely exposed to disastrous consequences.
And look, you're probably dealing with this right now in your own pipeline or your own team. We cling to this belief that if we just have enough data.
Right.
Oh, the obsession with data.
Right. If we just run enough analytics, buy the right enterprise software, do enough focus groups, we will automatically make the correct decision.
We think the data will save us.
But if your underlying assumption about why your customer behaves a certain way is wrong, your perfectly curated data is just going to help you make the wrong decision with more confidence.
That is a brilliant way to put it, making the wrong decision with more confidence.
Which brings me to this amazing analogy from the research regarding American and Japanese auto manufacturing. I love this one.
It is the perfect physical manifestation of operating on a flawed assumption.
So let's look at the factory floor. How did the American assembly lines traditionally operate compared to the Japanese model?
Well, traditionally, the American auto assembly line was built on a very specific underlying assumption. Imperfection is inevitable, and we will just fix it at the end.
Okay, so you build the car piece by piece as it goes down the conveyor belt.
Right. And at the very end of the line, you have quality control workers, and these workers are literally armed with rubber mallets.
Wait, like actual hammers?
Literal rubber mallets. So if a car door doesn't quite fit the frame or, the hinges are a millimeter off, the worker takes the mallet and just bangs the door into place until it forces a fit.
They just whack it until it clicks.
Yeah, they hammer the product into submission. They're using brute force to correct a systemic misalignment.
Wow. Okay, so now contrast that entire philosophy with the Japanese manufacturing model.
Right. If you go to a Japanese auto plant, you will not find workers with rubber mallets at the end of the line.
Because they design for success from the very beginning.
Yes. They don't assume imperfection. They engineer alignment. The parts are designed and manufactured with such incredible precision from the very start that when the door meets the frame at the end of the line, it just fits.
Perfect.
Automatically. No mallet required.
So let's unpack the psychology of this for a second. Why does the American model rely on the mallet? It's not because American engineers are stupid.
No, not at all. It's because it feels faster in the short term.
Right. You just push the car down the line, get it built, and deal with the friction later. But the hidden cost of that rubber mallet is massive.
Oh, absolutely.
You're stressing the metal, you're wearing out the worker, and you're basically guaranteeing that the door's going to start rattling 5 years down the road because it was never meant to fit that way in the first place.
And that car door is the perfect metaphor for how most of us live, and how 99% of businesses operate.
Are you designing your foundation for success from the start?
Right. Do you know your core purpose so that every action naturally aligns? Or are you just stumbling forward, assuming you know what you're doing, and constantly using a metaphorical rubber mallet to fix the friction later?
I mean, I love the elegance of that metaphor, but I have to push back a little here.
Yeah.
I want to play devil's advocate for you listening.
Go for it.
We live in the era of big data. We have, machine learning algorithms predicting what I'm going to buy before I even know I want it. So if data and research are supposed to protect us, why are we still banging on car doors? Why does the data fail to eliminate the mallet?
It's a great question, because data, no matter how masked it is entirely retrospective and descriptive.
Meaning it only looks backward.
Yeah, it gives you information about the what. It tells you what is happening. It tells you that your conversion rate dropped by 4% on a Tuesday.
Or what demographic is clicking your ads.
Exactly. But data fundamentally cannot tell you why it's happening. And more importantly, it cannot tell you why your organization even exists to address it. Data does not possess intent or belief.
So when an organization lacks that foundational purpose, when they don't have that engineered alignment from the very beginning, they're forced to use mallets to make things work.
That's right. Because when you don't naturally inspire people to fit together perfectly, you have to force the behavior. You have to bang the door into place.
And in the business world, these rubber mallets actually have a specific name. We call them manipulations.
Yes. Because when it comes to influencing human behavior, you really only have two options. There is no third way. You either inspire people or you manipulate them.
Wow. Okay. And the research gives us a very comprehensive, honestly, deeply uncomfortable menu of these manipulations. These are the tactics we see every single day.
The tactics most of us use, honestly.
Yeah, because we lack a true source of inspiration. The list is essentially 6 core mallets: price, promotions, fear, aspirations, peer pressure, and novelty.
We should really spend some time here because this is the water we swim in.
Let's do it. Let's start with price. I mean, it's the oldest trick in the book.
It is the most common, most instinctual manipulation in the history of commerce. Drop the price and they will buy.
And let's be intellectually honest here. It works.
Oh, it works incredibly well. If you drop your price low enough, people will buy your product. But the underlying psychology of price manipulation is a total death spiral for a company.
Because when you continuously cut prices to attract customers, you are actively training your customer base to care about one thing and one thing only.
The price tag.
Right. You are commoditizing yourself.
Entirely. You aren't building loyalty, you are buying transactions.
It's a complete race to the bottom. Like, let's say I'm buying my paper towels from your company because you have the lowest price. I'm not buying them because I love your brand.
Right. You're buying them to save $1.
Exactly. So the absolute microsecond your competitor figures out a way to offer their paper towels for a penny less, I'm gone.
You'll abandon them without a second thought.
Zero genuine loyalty. And the tragedy is you've completely destroyed your profit margins. You've stretched your supply chain to the breaking point, all to acquire a customer who will betray you tomorrow for a copper coin.
And the stress that puts on an organization is immense. Once you establish yourself as the cheap option, you can never raise your prices again without facing a massive revolt. You are trapped.
You're in a prison of your own making. Okay, so that's price. And promotions function in a very similar, highly destructive way.
They do.
Yeah.
We're talking about, cashback incentives, mail-in rebates, buy one, get one free deals.
The psychology of a promotion is fascinating because it relies on creating an artificial incentive to overcome the natural friction of buying something the customer doesn't deeply desire.
Right. Think about a mail-in rebate. You buy a printer, and you have to cut out the barcode, fill out a form in triplicate, and mail it to a processing center in South Dakota.
Just to get $50 back in 8 weeks.
Exactly. The company is betting on the fact that a large percentage of people will experience the dopamine hit of the idea of the discount at the register, but will fail to execute the required steps to actually claim it.
Which is inherently adversarial.
It's the ultimate rubber mallet. The product itself isn't inspiring them to buy, so you hammer them with an arbitrary financial game.
It provides this immediate, temporary spike in quarterly revenue, but it spirals into completely unsustainable practices. You are basically bribing people to do business with you.
The bribes do not build empires.
Okay, so let's pivot to the darker side of the manipulation spectrum. Let's talk about fear.
Oh, fear is incredibly powerful.
We see this constantly, like, buy this alarm system or your family's in danger.
Or vote for me or the other guy is going to destroy your way of life.
Yes, take this supplement or you're going to age prematurely. It plays directly into our evolutionary biology.
It does. It literally hijacks the amygdala. Fear is the most primal emotion we possess. From an evolutionary standpoint, the humans who paid attention to fear were the ones who survived the saber-toothed tiger.
Right, so when a marketer or a politician uses fear, our brains are hardwired to stop everything we are doing and react.
It is highly effective. I mean, if someone puts a gun to your head, you will behave exactly as they want you to.
But again, what is the quality of that relationship?
It's toxic. It creates a trauma bond, not brand loyalty. It is entirely transactional.
The moment the fear is removed or the moment someone else offers a faster way to alleviate that fear, the relationship is instantly severed.
Because you resent the entity that is making you afraid. You don't love the alarm company. You just hate the idea of being burgled.
Which leads us perfectly into the mirror image of fear. Aspirations. This one is tricky.
It's very insidious because it actually sounds positive. It sounds like inspiration.
Lose 20 pounds. Become a millionaire. Live your best life. This is the bread and butter of the self-help industry, the fitness industry, and massive corporate transformation initiatives.
The problem with aspirational manipulation is that it sells a future state without providing the foundational why required to sustain the journey.
Okay, break that down for me.
Aspirational messaging seeks to motivate individuals by triggering a massive dopamine spike. When you buy the $2,000 exercise bike, your brain floods with dopamine because you are visualizing your future idealized self.
For a moment, you feel like the fit person in the commercial.
Exactly. But the dopamine wears off.
It wears off the moment you actually have to wake up at 5 a.m. and sweat.
Right. Because the aspiration was a manipulation. It was a quick fix. An aspiration without a deeply internalized foundational purpose is just an empty promise.
Which is exactly why gym memberships absolutely skyrocket in January and are completely abandoned by March. People bought the aspiration, they didn't adopt a new lifestyle.
And we see companies do this internally all the time, too.
Oh yeah, management brings in a consultant, they announce a massive new initiative. We are going to be the most innovative company in the sector by 2030.
Everyone claps at the town hall. They hand out branded mugs.
And 3 weeks later, everyone is back to their old habits. Because they manipulated the staff with an aspiration, but they didn't change the underlying foundation.
Which brings us to peer pressure.
4 out of 5 dentists recommend.
Join over 1 million satisfied customers.
Everyone in your neighborhood is upgrading.
Peer pressure exploits our deep-seated evolutionary psychological need to belong to the herd. For early humans, isolation literally meant death.
If you were cast out of the tribe, you starved or were eaten.
So we are biologically programmed to look around, see what the majority is doing, and conform. We assume that if 1 million people are doing it, it must be safe.
It's outsourcing our critical thinking to the crowd. We use the consensus of others to establish credibility rather than evaluating the actual substance of the product.
And the danger here is that reliance on consensus often leads to terrible, irrational decision-making. You buy the software just because your competitors bought it, not because it actually solves your specific problem.
You're just terrified of being left behind. Okay, and the final manipulation on our menu is novelty. And the sources make a point that it is incredibly important that we make a very sharp distinction between novelty and true innovation.
Yes, this is a vital distinction. True innovation fundamentally changes an industry. It alters how we interact with the world. Novelty merely offers temporary excitement without adding lasting value.
And the classic example we have to talk about here is the Motorola RAZR flip phone.
It is the perfect case study. If you go back to the mid-2000s, the RAZR was an absolute phenomenon. It was shockingly thin, sleek, made of brushed metal.
It looked like a prop from a sci-fi movie. I had one. Everyone had one. It was a total status symbol.
But if you look under the hood, what was it really? It was the exact same fundamental technology as every other phone on the market. It didn't do anything new. It didn't change how you communicated.
It just looked incredibly cool.
Exactly. It was a novelty.
It's like mistaking a shiny new paint job for a radically better engine. It gives you a temporary massive spike in sales because the novelty triggers intrigue.
But what happens next?
The next company comes out with a slightly shinier paint job. They make a phone that's 1 millimeter thinner or it comes in pink. And suddenly, your novelty is gone and you're back to square one.
You're trapped in a cycle of aesthetic commoditization, constantly having to invent a new gimmick just to keep people's attention.
Now compare that to the release of the iPhone just a few years later. The iPhone wasn't a novelty, it was an innovation. It completely destroyed the existing paradigm of what a phone even was.
It made the RAZR look like a stone tablet.
Exactly. So when we look at this entire menu, price, promotions, fear, aspirations, peer pressure, novelty, we realize that these are all just different shaped rubber mallets.
They are external forces applied to create a temporary change in behavior. And the overwhelming danger is that because these tactics absolutely do work in the short term, they have become the entrenched standard in global business.
But just because it works doesn't make it right.
No. Relying on these tactics creates a vicious cycle that profoundly weakens organizations from the inside out. It creates an environment of massive chronic stress for everyone involved.
The consumer is stressed because they're constantly being bombarded, manipulated, and scared into making decisions.
And the seller is stressed because the effects of manipulations are fleeting. The moment the promotion ends, sales drop, so you have to invent a new promotion. You're on a treadmill that keeps accelerating.
And if you want to see what happens when an entire global system is built entirely on these short-sighted, manipulative incentives, you just have to look at the 2008 financial crisis.
This is the ultimate terrifying cautionary tale of the mallet-based economy.
Impartially speaking, 2008 was the catastrophic intersection of multiple manipulations happening simultaneously at a systemic level.
Right. The banking system and the mortgage industry were manipulating aspirations on a massive scale, selling the American dream, telling everyone they deserve to own a massive home regardless of their actual financial stability.
They hijacked the dopamine of the future self-idealization.
Yes. And they combined it with the manipulation of promotions, offering subprime mortgages with absurdly low teaser rates that would inevitably balloon.
Adjustable rate mortgages that functioned exactly like a mail-in rebate designed to fail.
And then they layered on peer pressure. Everyone is flipping houses. Everyone is getting rich. You're a fool if you don't buy now.
There was zero foundational why. There was absolutely no long-term relationship building, no consideration of sustainable value. It was purely transactional, driven by short-term manipulations, and it literally brought the global economy to its knees.
It is the ultimate collapse of a system devoid of purpose.
Okay, I want to pause here because we have just spent 20 minutes completely dismantling and trashing the way that 90% of the world operates.
We have.
We've painted manipulations as these evil, destructive forces. But keeping with the mission of this deep dive, we have to look at this impartially. We cannot just accept a theory without challenging it.
Absolutely.
And there is a very powerful, highly pragmatic counter-perspective that we need to address. Some of the research we're examining includes a critical analysis from the Harvard Business Review, and it asks a very blunt question.
It's the reality check question.
Right. It says, in a hyper-competitive market, aren't these short-term tactics sometimes a necessary evil? Like, if I am a small business owner and my competitor opens up across the street and slashes their prices by 30% and I'm bleeding customers.
You don't have time to sit your team down in a circle and discover your inner why.
Exactly. If I don't make payroll on Friday, my purpose doesn't matter because we are bankrupt. So sometimes don't you just have to grab the mallet?
We have to completely validate that critique.
Yeah.
Because it is the reality of the free market. The empirical research points out that not all organizations can just instantly pivot from a transactional strategy to an inspirational one overnight.
It takes time.
It takes years to build deep limbic trust. When you are facing an immediate economic downturn, a supply chain collapse, or a massive competitive threat, you might absolutely have to drop your price.
You might have to run a promotion. You might have to rely on a short-term manipulation just to survive the quarter.
It's the sinking ship scenario.
Oh, I like that.
If your ship strikes an iceberg and is taking on water, you do not gather the crew on the deck to discuss your overarching purpose in maritime navigation.
No, you grab a bucket and you start bailing water.
Bailing water is a short-term manipulation of the water level inside the boat. It is a necessary evil to keep you from drowning.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
So the critical interpretation here is that while the focus on why is incredibly valuable, it can sometimes oversimplify the sheer brutal complexity that businesses face on a daily basis.
Manipulations do work for transactions. The problem isn't that manipulations exist or that they are occasionally utilized to navigate a crisis.
The fatal flaw is when bailing water becomes your entire long-term strategy.
Yes. You cannot build loyalty with a bucket.
If you survive the crisis, but you never fix the hole in the boat, and you just keep bailing water forever, you will exhaust your crew and eventually sink anyway.
Manipulations can keep you alive, but they cannot build an empire. They cannot inspire devotion.
Okay, so this brings us to the crux of the entire deep dive. If manipulations are stressful, exhausting, ultimately detrimental to long-term loyalty, and only function as an emergency bucket, what is the alternative?
How do we stop using the rubber mallet?
Right. How do we engineer the car door so it just fits? This is where we flip the script. This is where we introduce the core framework of Simon Sinek's philosophy, the Golden Circle.
The Golden Circle is the blueprint. It is the framework that differentiates how truly inspiring, world-changing leaders and organizations operate compared to the rest of the pack.
And visually, it is incredibly simple. I want you to imagine a bullseye consisting of 3 concentric circles.
Okay, let's build this bullseye, starting from the outside edge and working our way into the center. The outermost, largest circle is the what?
Every single organization on the planet, and frankly, every individual knows what they do. This is the easiest circle to define.
These are the tangible products a company sells. It's the specific services they offer. For an individual, it's your job title, your daily tasks.
It's completely straightforward.
Yeah.
If you stop the CEO of a car company on the street and ask, what do you do? They will say, we manufacture and sell cars. Anyone can answer the what.
Moving one ring inward, we get to the middle circle, the HOW.
Some companies and some individuals know how they do what they do. This is a bit more complex.
The HOW refers to the values, the principles, and the specific processes that guide their actions. It's often called a unique selling proposition.
Or a proprietary algorithm. It's the corporate culture. It's the methodology that sets them slightly apart from the competitor who is making the exact same what.
So our car company CEO might say, we make cars, and how we do it is through proprietary zero-waste manufacturing process and industry-leading safety testing.
It explains the process behind the product. But then we cross the threshold. We move past the what and the HOW, and we get to the very center of the bullseye, the innermost circle, the WHY.
This is where almost everyone fails. Very, very few people and very few organizations can clearly, cleanly articulate WHY, they do what they do.
And we have to be extremely clear here, because this is the most common mistake. Making money is not a WHY.
Making money is a result.
Exactly. Making money is the necessary byproduct of a functional business. It is the fuel for the engine. But the fuel is not the purpose of the car.
The WHY is the core purpose, the cause, or the deep-seated belief that drives the organization. It answers the fundamental questions. Why does your company exist? Why did you get out of bed this morning? And why should anyone else care?
And this is where the massive tectonic paradigm shift happens in how we communicate. The research shows that the vast majority of companies, the ones relying on the rubber mallets, communicate from the outside in.
They start at the edge of the bullseye with the what, they maybe mention the HOW, and they almost never reach the WHY.
Think about the standard, boring marketing pitch you hear a dozen times a day. If a computer company communicates from the outside in, it sounds like this. We make great computers. They are beautifully designed, simple to use, and incredibly user-friendly. Want to buy one?
That is outside in. What we do, how we do it, please buy it. And it is completely uninspiring.
It relies entirely on the what. It forces me to make a decision based purely on features and price, which immediately commoditizes the product.
But the inspiring leaders, the ones who build the cult followings, they reverse the order. They communicate from the inside out. They start with a WHY.
Let's look at one of the most famous examples from our case studies, Apple. Apple's a technology company that makes hardware and software. But how does Apple communicate from the inside out?
If Apple communicated like everyone else, they would use that boring pitch we just gave. But they never do. Apple always starts with the WHY.
Their core ethos sounds more like this. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. That's the WHY.
It's a belief.
Then they move to the HOW. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly.
And finally, almost as an afterthought, they get to the what. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one?
It completely changes how you receive the message. It feels entirely different. They aren't selling a piece of electronics. They are selling a philosophical belief.
They are selling the idea of rebellion, of individual empowerment.
The computer, the phone, the watch, those are just the tangible proofs of their beliefs. Those are just the whats. And because they start with the WHY, people who share that belief are magnetically drawn to them.
It creates a loyalty that completely transcends the product. It's why people will camp outside an Apple store in the rain for 3 days just to buy a phone that is arguably only marginally better than the one they already have in their pocket.
They aren't waiting in line for a processor upgrade. They are waiting in line to reaffirm their own identity.
Another brilliant case study in the research is Harley-Davidson. This is perhaps the purest distillation of the golden circle in the physical world.
What is Harley-Davidson's WHY? It is certainly not, we manufacture two-wheeled motorized vehicles.
No, their WHY is an aggressive, deeply held belief in personal freedom, rebellion, and rugged American independence. It's the open road.
Yes. And because they have communicated that WHY so clearly and so consistently for decades, they have achieved the ultimate metric of brand loyalty, the tattoo phenomenon.
This is wild. People literally tattoo the corporate logo of Harley-Davidson onto their bodies.
Let's really think about how insane that is. You do not tattoo a corporate logo on your bicep because you deeply appreciate the company's supply chain efficiency, right?
Definitely not for the engine displacement value to cost ratio.
You tattoo that logo on your skin because that symbol has become a shorthand for your own soul. You share their WHY.
They don't sell motorcycles, they sell a belief. The motorcycle is just the what that allows you to physically ride that belief down the highway.
And we see this exact same dynamic even in highly commoditized service industries. Look at the airline industry. It is notoriously difficult, highly regulated, and universally hated by consumers.
But look at the history of Southwest Airlines.
When Southwest started, they were up against massive legacy carriers. But they didn't just want to be another airline. Their founders had a very specific WHY.
They wanted to champion the common man. They believed deeply that air travel shouldn't be a luxury reserved for the wealthy elite.
They believed anyone should be able to fly. And that singular purpose, that WHY, rigidly dictated their HOW.
Because they believed in championing the common man, how they operated had to reflect that. It meant flying short point-to-point routes, turning planes around in 20 minutes.
It meant flying only one type of aircraft, the Boeing 737, to keep maintenance costs absurdly low.
Stripping out all the luxurious extras, the first-class cabins, the hot meals.
Which resulted in their what? Extremely cheap, highly accessible plane tickets that allowed average people to travel. Every single decision they made was filtered through their WHY.
And the result was a level of employee morale and customer affection that legacy carriers couldn't buy with $1 billion marketing budget.
So the framework is undeniable. Inside-out communication. Why? How? What? It builds profound loyalty, it allows you to completely avoid the trap of constant manipulations, and it inspires visceral action.
But listening to this, it's very easy for a skeptic to dismiss the golden circle as just another clever marketing gimmick.
Right, it sounds like a nice little diagram. A highly paid consultant draws on a whiteboard to make executives feel warm and fuzzy about their mission statement.
But here is where our deep dive takes a massive, undeniable pivot. Because the research argues that this isn't just a marketing theory. This isn't just poetry. The golden circle is actually rooted in literal human biology.
This is where it gets truly profound for me. Simon Sinek didn't just invent a clever communication strategy. He essentially mapped human communication directly onto the anatomical cross-section of the human brain.
The biological evidence proves why this framework is so devastatingly effective.
Okay, let's go deep into the neuroscience here. Explain the biology of the bullseye.
If you look at a cross-section of the human brain from the top down, the architecture corresponds perfectly to the 3 levels of the golden circle. The outermost layer of our brain, the newest part in terms of human evolution, is the Homo sapien brain. It's called the neocortex.
And this corresponds to the what level?
Exactly. The neocortex is responsible for rational, analytical thought. It handles complex data, spatial reasoning, and most importantly, the neocortex is responsible for all of our language.
It is where words are formed and understood.
Yes.
So when I am reading a spec sheet for a new car, and I'm looking at the miles per gallon, the horsepower, and the trunk space, that is my neocortex engaging directly with the what?
It's completely rational. You can look at the data, and you can use your language center to explain exactly why 30 miles per gallon is mathematically better than 20.
My neocortex thrives on facts and figures. But beneath the neocortex, buried deeper in the brain, is the limbic system.
This is an older, much more primal part of our mammalian brain. And the limbic brain corresponds directly to the HOW and the WHY levels of the golden circle.
What does the limbic brain control?
The limbic brain is entirely responsible for all of our feelings. It generates trust, loyalty, love, and fear. Furthermore, the limbic brain is responsible for all human behavior and all of our decision-making.
Okay, but here is the critical, absolute, mind-blowing detail that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
The limbic brain has absolutely no capacity for language.
None. Zero. Let's stop and really absorb that.
The part of our brain that makes the decisions, the part that actually pulls the trigger, the part that feels trust and loyalty, does not have words.
It is neurologically incapable of processing or generating language. It communicates in feelings.
This is the exact biological reason why it is so incredibly difficult to articulate our deepest emotions.
This is the anatomical origin of the gut feeling.
Yes. When a decision feels right in your gut, what is actually happening is your limbic brain is processing vast amounts of sensory and emotional information, aligning it with your core beliefs and signaling a decision.
But because the limbic brain has no language, it cannot send a sentence to your mouth to explain itself.
Which perfectly explains the scenario we started this whole deep dive with. When you interview that perfect candidate and the resume is flawless, all the whats are perfect.
Yeah.
Your neocortex loves them.
But your limbic brain, picking up on microexpressions, tone, and a fundamental misalignment of values, says no.
And when you try to explain it, Your language center is scrambling, trying to rationalize a decision it didn't actually make. You just say, the vibe is off.
Your neocortex is literally struggling to justify the biological reaction of your limbic system.
Now apply this biology to how companies communicate. When an organization communicates from the outside in, starting with the what, here are our features, here are our benefits, here's our price, who are they talking to?
They are talking exclusively to the neocortex. The consumer's brain can understand vast amounts of complicated information. They can analyze the specs, but it doesn't drive behavior.
It doesn't inspire action because the neocortex doesn't make the final call. The neocortex just gathers data.
But when you communicate from the inside out,
When you start with the WHY, you are bypassing the rational filter of the neocortex entirely. You're speaking directly to the limbic brain.
you are speaking the language of emotion and belief. You establish a visceral connection. You trigger feelings of trust and alignment.
And then once you've secured that emotional connection in the limbic brain, you provide the HOW and the what. You give them the features and the specs.
Why? To give their neocortex the rational data it needs to justify the decision their limbic brain has already made.
I buy the Apple computer because my limbic brain aligns with the belief in challenging the status quo. I justify spending $2,000 on it by letting my neocortex talk about the high-resolution screen and the battery life.
Exactly. Emotion drives the choice. Logic justifies the action.
This maps so perfectly onto interpersonal relationships. There's a brilliant analogy in the research comparing corporate sales and leadership to dating, because human relationships operate on the exact same biological hardware.
They absolutely do. Imagine going on a first date, and you sit down at the table, and you decide to communicate from the outside in. You immediately start listing your whats.
You rattle off your stats. Hi, it's nice to meet you. I make $150,000 a year. I drive a European luxury sedan. I have a master's degree from a top-tier university. I own a 3-bedroom house in a great neighborhood, and I go to the gym 4 days a week. Do you want to go steady?
It's the most repulsive date imaginable.
It's awful.
But objectively, all of those things are positive attributes. The other person's neocortex understands all that data perfectly. It computes that you're a highly successful organism.
But it feels incredibly cold, arrogant, and entirely transactional. There is zero emotional connection.
You haven't spoken to their limbic brain at all. You haven't given them a reason to trust you, only a list of reasons to calculate your net worth.
But if you go on a date and you open up by sharing your beliefs, your passions, your WHY, you know what I love about my life? I love waking up every day feeling like I'm solving complex puzzles that actually help people. Yeah. I've always believed in leaving things slightly better than I found them. It's just how I'm wired.
Suddenly, the dynamic shifts entirely. The other person leans in. Their limbic system engages. They feel a resonance, a connection.
They think, I believe that too.
And then later in the evening, when they naturally discover that you make a good living and have a nice house, those whats serve as rational, tangible proof of your successful WHY. They validate the gut feeling.
Sales, marketing, and leadership work the exact same way.
Yeah.
If you just list your product features, you are the terrible date.
You are just walking around shouting your resume at people.
It highlights that genuine connection, whether it's a romantic relationship or brand loyalty, starts with purpose rather than superficial attributes. And this brings up a really crucial point about authenticity.
Right. Authenticity isn't just a buzzword. It is a biological requirement of the golden circle.
It is the alignment of the limbic system and the neocortex. Authenticity arises when an organization or a person consistently demonstrates their internal WHY through their external actions and offerings.
The what must be consistent with the WHY. It provides the proof.
If Apple came out and said their WHY was challenging the status quo, but then they released a beige, boring, incredibly complicated desktop computer that looked exactly like every other PC from 1995.
The consumer's limbic brain would instantly sense the inauthenticity. It would scream fraud.
The trust would be broken immediately because the what betrayed the WHY.
Humans possess highly evolved bullshit detectors. We are biologically attuned to detect when someone's stated beliefs do not match their actions. When the WHY and the what are out of balance, trust evaporates.
Okay, we have built up the immense, undeniable power of the WHY. We've traced its origins from the factory floors of Japanese auto plants to the devastating fallout of the 2008 financial crisis.
We've seen how it built empires like Apple and Harley-Davidson.
And we've drilled all the way down into the anatomy of our own brains to prove why it works. The golden circle feels like the ultimate infallible answer to every business problem. But as critical thinkers, we cannot just accept the gospel without looking for the cracks in the foundation.
We have to look at the blind spots. We have to examine the limits of the WHY.
This is a crucial pivot in our analysis. Because while the golden circle is a profoundly powerful tool for creating alignment and loyalty, there are massive dangers in treating it like a religious dogma.
The critical interpretations in the research, specifically those looking at long-term corporate survival, warn against the severe danger of overemphasis.
It is entirely possible to become so obsessively, rigidly focused on your WHY, you completely lose touch with the operational reality of your what and your how W.
So what does this actually mean for us in the messy, unpredictable, real world? We keep bringing up the Harvard Business Review research, and they suggest that an extreme, inflexible adherence to a singular purpose might actually blind an organization to shifting market demands.
Yes. The empirical studies point out that while a strong purpose provides a foundation, successful organizations must exhibit extreme adaptability and responsiveness to external market changes.
The world is not static. Technology evolves, consumer habits shift overnight, global supply chains break.
If you hold on to your foundational purpose so rigidly that you ignore practical considerations, ignore external pressures, or dismiss massive technological shifts because they don't perfectly fit your preconceived narrative, your company will die.
No matter how inspiring your WHY is, inspiration cannot pay the rent if you are producing a product nobody needs anymore.
I think of it like this. Imagine you are the captain of a ship. Your WHY is your compass.
Okay, your compass.
The compass points to your ultimate destination. It is your true north. It represents your deepest purpose. The compass is absolutely vital. If you don't have it, you're just drifting aimlessly in the ocean, relying on the rubber mallets of the wind and the current to take you wherever.
A ship without a compass is lost.
Right. But, and this is a critical part, if you are sailing toward your true north, and a massive, catastrophic hurricane suddenly appears directly in your path, you have to turn the wheel. You have to deviate.
If you refuse to steer your ship around the hurricane because you are too obsessively stubborn about traveling in a perfectly straight line according to your compass,
Your ship is going to sink. Your crew is going to drown. You have to possess the operational flexibility to navigate the storm. Your WHY shouldn't force you into operational stubbornness.
that is a phenomenal analogy. The compass does not steer the ship. It provides the heading, but the captain must interact with the reality of the ocean.
The critique is that frameworks like Sinek's, if misinterpreted, can oversimplify incredibly complex organizational dynamics. In the real world, the what and the how do you have to be incredibly flexible, fluid, and reactive.
If the market demands an entirely new kind of product, you have to adapt your what.
But wait, let me interrupt there. If I'm constantly changing my what to adapt to the market, don't I risk losing my authenticity?
The adaptation still has to be filtered through the WHY, doesn't it? Otherwise, I'm just chasing trends.
Exactly. That is the genius of balancing the circle. It is the synthesis of purpose and pragmatism.
The WHY must remain authentic and relatively stable. It serves as the ultimate filter for decision-making. But the what and the how W must remain entirely adaptable to reality.
The golden circle is a tool for clarity. It is not a straitjacket. It helps you ensure that as you adapt to massive market pressures, as you build a new product, you do so in a way that doesn't betray the core trust you've built with your limbic-driven loyalists.
If we look at Apple again, this proves the point perfectly. Their what has changed violently over the decades. They started by making clunky desktop computers for hobbyists.
Then they pivoted to laptops. Then they completely disrupted the music industry with the iPod.
Then they destroyed the iPod by inventing the iPhone. Now they make watches and services. They adapted to massive seismic market shifts. They navigated the hurricanes.
And imagine if they hadn't. Imagine if Apple had rigidly defined their WHY as we make desktop computers.
They would be bankrupt. They would be a footnote in tech history.
But because their WHY was always abstracted one level higher, because their WHY was challenging the status quo and empowering the individual, they were able to completely alter their what and their how without ever losing their core identity or their followers.
The watch challenges the status quo just as much as the Mac did in 1984.
And that proves the balance beautifully. The HBR critique is highly valid. You cannot ignore the brutal reality of the market. You must be adaptable.
But the golden circle remains the ultimate operating system because it provides the psychological safety net that allows you to radically change your product, to evolve without losing your corporate soul.
This has been an absolutely incredible journey today. We have covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started by looking at the dangerous trap of false assumptions, how believing the earth is flat or assuming we understand exactly how dictators seize power completely blinds us to our own vulnerabilities.
We saw how companies without a solid foundation, without that perfectly engineered Japanese car door, are forced to endlessly swing the rubber mallet of manipulations.
We dissected the exhausting, high-stress reality of price cuts, fear-mongering, and empty aspirations tactics that might serve as a bucket to keep the lights on during a crisis, but ultimately destroy long-term trust.
Exactly as we saw in the devastating lead-up to the 2008 financial crash.
We then explored the profound alternative, the golden circle, the power of communicating from the inside out, starting with the WHY, moving to the HOW, and ending with the what.
And we discovered the mind-blowing reality that this isn't just a marketing trick, it is a direct reflection of human evolutionary biology.
It is about bypassing the language-heavy, highly rational neocortex to speak directly and intimately to the emotional decision-making center of the limbic brain.
But we also made sure to ground it in the messy reality of the real world, acknowledging that a compass is useless if you sail straight into a hurricane out of stubborn pride.
The WHY gives you clarity and trust, but you still need the ruthless adaptability of your what to survive the shifting tides of the market.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring all of this directly back to you. I want you to take this framework and audit your own life this week. Look at how you are operating right now, today.
Audit your decisions. Look at how you communicate in your career, how you lead your team, or even how you manage your personal relationships.
Are you walking into the date and just aggressively listing your stats?
Are you relying on the rubber mallet of manipulation, using fear or temporary rewards to get your kids to do their chores, or to get your sales team to meet a Q3 deadline?
Ask yourself, with brutal honesty, if you are just communicating your what, or if you are truly leading with your WHY.
Because if you can find that WHY and communicate it clearly, you stop banging the door with a mallet. The pieces just start to fit. And as you ponder that, as you look at your own compass, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought, a question that builds on everything we've dissected today but looks to the future.
It's the ultimate stress test.
Exactly. We've talked extensively about how a visionary founder's deep-seated WHY can build an absolute empire. We see it with the founders of Harley-Davidson or the iconoclasts who build world-changing tech giants. The founder is the living embodiment of the WHY.
But what happens to the golden circle when that visionary leader is gone?
What happens when the person who spoke the purpose into existence leaves the room for good?
Can a WHY survive the death or departure of its architect?
Can an organization institutionalize inspiration? Or does a massive company inevitably lose its limbic connection over time, slowly drifting back to the what, forced by quarterly pressures to quietly pick up the rubber mallet once again?
Think about that the next time you see a once great, beloved company suddenly start slashing prices and offering mail-in rebates.
Did they lose the market or did they lose their WHY? Something to think about until our next deep dive.